All right, this next exercise is just really an exercise in practicing with Boolean expressions. So all I've done is I've swapped the true and the false return values here so that it returns false if the if condition holds and true if the if condition does not hold, if the else condition holds. So I want to know, what should you put in that if condition such that this method does the exact same thing as before? In other words, it returns true if stored array index is greater than num, strictly greater than num, and false otherwise. So take a minute to think about that. Okay, if you've thought about that, you'll know that the answer, hopefully, is D. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over this, but this is just an example of manipulating Boolean expressions. And you should be pretty comfortable transforming Boolean expressions into alternate representations such that the code has the same overall behavior like it does in this case. What I really want to spend some time on is this code writing problem. So this code writing problem is going to get you a little more warmed up for the exercises you're going to have to do in the PSA. And again, if you can just whip this off, there's no need to go through my slow explanation. So go ahead and just stop the video. In fact, I want everybody to stop the video and try to write this method yourself. And what this method should do, it's called any greater than n, and it takes one argument, the integer num. And it should return true if there's any element in stored array that's greater than num, and false if there's no element in stored array that's greater than num. So for example, if I have an array that is 1, 10, 12, 14, and I pass in num of, say, 11, then this should return true. But if I have this same array and my num that I pass in is, say, 15, then this should return false because none of those elements is greater than 15. But the first case with num being 11 returns true because there's at least one element. There's actually two elements, but there's at least one element that's greater than 11. So pause the video. I've started you off with a for each loop, and you should be familiar with what a for each loop is now. But just as a reminder, here's your loop control variable. That variable is going to take on one value per iteration from stored array. So it's going to march through stored array. The first time it will equal 1, the next time 10, the next time 12, and so on and so forth until it reaches the end of the array. So go ahead and write this code. Do your best. Really spend some time on this. You can listen to my explanation and you can understand it, but you're not really going to get your most learning unless you pause and actually take some time to try to write this method. All right, so I hope that you've taken some time. I hope that you've got it. I'm going to walk through one solution. It's probably not the only solution, but here's one solution to this problem. And the best way to know if your solution is correct is actually to implement it and start testing it in Dr. Java. So here's one potential solution to this problem. So what do I want to know? I want to know if an element in the array is greater than num. So I'm going to need I'm going to need an if statement. So what does my if statement say? Well, if my element from my array, which is stored in X, is greater than num, well, then I know that I've found the answer, right? I know the answer is true. The minute I find an element that's greater than num, then I know that the answer should be true. So I will just simply go ahead and return true. Now, here's the tricky part. You may have been tempted to say, else return false. Because if you didn't find something greater than num, then it's false, right? The problem with doing that is that you're going to abort your computation too quickly. Because once you return from a method, the method is over. So if I found an element that's greater than num, then the method should be over. I know the answer is true, and I can just return it. But if I haven't found it yet, there may be more elements to consider. So I can't quite return false yet. I have to keep looking through all the rest of the elements. So the way I do that is I simply let this for each loop finish. When it's all the way finished and I haven't returned true, then I know that the element is not in the array. So now I'm free to return false at this point. So again, if I find the element, if X is greater than num, I'll return true. Otherwise, I'll just keep going through the loop until its end. And only once I get to the end will my method return false. So if you wanted to, you could have looked ahead at these potential answers, but we just went ahead and wrote the method. You should make sure you understand why the other answers are not correct, though. Let's talk again about return. Take a second to answer this question. So what if I run this method called any greater than n that we just wrote, but after I return true, after the line return true, I say system.out.println found it. So what's going to be printed? Take a second. Okay. So the answer is actually nothing. In fact, the answer is it's going to create an error. Because even though we are going to find an element that's greater than 1, in fact, we'll find an element that's greater than 1 right here, when we return, the method is over. Let me repeat that, because this is really, really, really an important point about control flow. Return ends a method immediately. Like immediately, nothing can happen after a return statement. In fact, Java is so certain that you didn't actually mean to do this, because why would you put a statement right after a return statement? Because this print statement will never get executed. Java is so sure that you made a mistake that it will actually give you an error if you try to put this into your code. Java knows that that could never be what you mean to do, because immediately after the method has a return statement, it will return. It's gone. There's no more computation in that method. Try it out if you don't believe me or if you just want a little practice. But return immediately ends a method. If you hit a return statement, there is no more in that method. Okay, I'm going to pause here one more time, and then I'll pick up in the last video of this section.